By the waterhole, a log lays half in the red mud, and Marn has walked past it twice today without a second glance. It has not moved, and logs do not move, so his eyes slide over it the way they slide over any dead thing. But this log is breathing a slow, patient swell along its flank, and the mud all around it is scored with the deep drag of a heavy tail. It is not a log. 50,000 years ago, the very first people ever to set foot on this continent met a dragon, and it was as real as the water they came to drink. Not a spirit, not a story to frighten children, a living animal the length of a small bus, armored and ancient, watching these soft newcomers with the flat calm of a thing that has never once in its life been prey. And this is the one land in the entire human story where the strangers who arrived may have been both the hunted and the reason the monster is gone. Marn's people did not walk to Australia, they crossed open water to reach it, island to island on rafts and drifting logs, out past the last blue smudge of the land they knew. No human foot had ever pressed this sand before theirs, which makes them among the first people ever to stand on Sahel, the great vanished landmass that once fused Australia and New Guinea into a single continent. Behind them lies everything their ancestors understood about the world. Ahead of them lies a place built by entirely different rules, where every living thing is somehow wrong. Every animal Marn's people ever learned to fear or hunt, the deer, the wild cattle, the great cats of the northern world, simply does not exist here, and in their place waits a bestiary that looks assembled from a fever dream. A wombat the size of a rhinoceros plods across the floodplain on pillar legs, cropping saltbush with a face like a bulldozer blade. This is Diprotodon, nearly 3 tons of gentle giant, the largest marsupial that has ever lived. Its footprints are craters in the clay, wide enough for a child to sit inside, and it is far too heavy to run, so it barely bothers to notice the strangers watching it. A kangaroo taller than a grown man watches from the scrub with a strangely short, flat face, its long arms hooked to drag whole branches down to its mouth. Marn's people have no name for it yet, we call it Procoptodon, and it is too enormous to bound away quickly, so it simply stands its ground and chews, staring back at them. But not everything on this plain is content to eat leaves, and the newcomers do not yet know how to tell the grazers from the killers. Somewhere in the trees waits the marsupial lion, Thylacoleo, no bigger than a leopard, yet built like a sprung trap, with the strongest bite for its body size of any mammal ever measured. Its jaws shear flesh rather than gnaw it, and each hand carries a hooked thumb claw like a curved skinning knife, made for holding prey while those jaws do their work. For a people fresh to this land, the law is merciless and simple. You cannot tell just by looking which shape wants to kill you, and getting the answer wrong even once is fatal. In the old country, they had known every predator by heart, its shape, its cry, the seasons of its hunger, but here each silhouette is a fresh riddle written in an unknown hand. In those first seasons, half the danger is simply that nothing here has learned to fear a human being, so the animals do not flee, and the predators do not yet recognize the small upright shape as anything but easy meat. So Marn's people learn the only way newcomers ever learn, by watching, by careful loss, by counting the ones who do not return to the fire at dusk. And the strangest and most patient predator of all is not hidden in the trees at all. It is out by the water, sunning itself, wearing the shape of a fallen log. The dragon has a name in our science, Varanus priscus, better known as Megalania, and it is the largest land-living lizard the Earth has ever produced. It reached reliably around 5.5 meters in length, and by the boldest estimates approached 7, a cold-blooded ambush giant that ruled this continent for perhaps 1,000,000 years without a single rival its own size. It is a monitor lizard, a close cousin of the living Komodo dragon, scaled up into a nightmare and handed an entire continent as its private hunting ground. To picture it properly, imagine the Komodo dragon you have seen on nature films, already the size of a man, already able to drop a water buffalo, and then imagine that same animal grown 3 or 4 times longer, heavy as a small car, and unafraid of anything that lives. And here is the detail that changes everything about how this animal killed. Its living relatives, the Komodo dragon and the smaller monitors, carry venom glands set into their lower jaws, a fact only proven in modern times, and one that quietly rewrote what these lizards are. No soft tissue survives from Megalania, so no one can ever prove it carried venom too. That is the honest edge of what we know, and we should say it plainly. But if it shared its family's chemistry, then its bite did something far crueler than simply tear, because monitor venom thins the blood, drops the pressure, brings on shock, and keeps a wound from ever closing. Which means that for the dragon, surviving the strike was never really the point. The strike only had to land once, and everything after that was just the wound doing slow, patient arithmetic. The hunt itself begins with nothing at all, because a reptile does not chase you across the open plain the way a lion does. Instead, it banks the sun's heat in its huge body through the long morning and simply waits beside the trail, beside the water, beside the one path every thirsty thing must take to drink. The stillness is total, so complete that a whole herd can drink an arm's length away and never once sense the death lying in the reeds beside them. Then comes the ambush, a lunge from cover so fast the eye cannot follow it, jaws snapping shut like a bear trap, and a low sweep of the body that takes the legs out from under a full-grown animal. And then strangely the dragon lets go and steps back into stillness because it does not need to finish you. It has all the time in the world, and now so does its venom. A bitten diprotodon staggers away bleeding on the inside and lies down to die a full day later, a mile downstream, thinking it had escaped. The lizard simply follows the smell of a body that has already stopped fighting, tasting the wind with that long forked tongue until the scent trail ends at the meat. There is a particular horror in a predator that feels no urgency, because you cannot read its intentions the way you can read a hungry cat. The dragon may lie in the same spot for 2 days, and it is impossible to know whether it is asleep or simply deciding. For Marn, the lesson arrives young and is never forgotten. The water gives life, and the thing beside the water waits without hunger and without haste to take it back. For thousands of years, this is the balance of the land the dragon rules, and the humans learn its rules and step very carefully around them. They drink upstream where the reeds are thin, they read the mud for the drag of a heavy tail, and they teach their children which shapes are logs and which shapes are death. And for a long time, that careful coexistence is all they can manage, survive alongside the giant, give it a wide berth, and lose the occasional careless one to the reeds. Then slowly the balance begins to tip, not through any single battle, but through something the great reptile has no defense against at all. It is fire and time and the cold arithmetic of how many young a body can make. Marn's people carry fire and wield it across the whole land as a tool, burning the country to flush game, to open the choking scrub, and to green the fresh new growth that draws the grazers in. A fire drive does not care what it corners, sweeping everything ahead of it, the giant kangaroos, the diprotodon herds, and the slow, sun-dependent reptile that cannot possibly outrun a wall of flame. But the deeper wound is far quieter, and it is the one that truly decides the war. A dragon like this breeds like a reptile, slowly, rarely, a scatter of leathery eggs buried in a warm mound, most of which never hatch. It takes many long years to grow a 5-meter apex predator from a hatchling small enough for a bird to eat, which means the giant can absorb almost no loss at all. Kill a single breeding female here, burn a nesting mound there, and take the eggs whenever you stumble across them for an easy, rich meal, and there is nothing in the biology fast enough to replace them. This is the same grim pattern that plays out again and again across the world in these thousands of years. The mammoth, the giant ground sloth, the cave bear, all of them large and slow to breed, all of them vanishing within a few thousand years of humans arriving on their shores. A slow-breeding giant and a clever, fire-carrying, ever-hungry newcomer are a fatal combination, even without a single deliberate war between them. The humans never need to declare war on the dragon, they only have to change the entire country around it, one burned season at a time. Every fire that thins the grazers thins the dragon's food, and every year the megafauna dwindle, the giant that fed on them dwindles right alongside them. And here we must be scrupulously honest, because honesty is the whole point of a story like this. No human eye watched it happen, and scientists still argue fiercely over how much was people and how much was a drying, shifting climate. But the youngest bones of the dragon we have ever found sit right at the moment Marn's people arrive on the continent, and in all the rock that piles up afterward, the giant is simply never found again. Here is the thing that makes this particular story so rare among all the origin stories we tell about ourselves. Almost everywhere else in our deep past, we are the small ones, the hunted, the prey, the soft animals that sleep in trees and run from the dark. But on this continent, for the very first time in our long journey, The newcomer and the old king stand as two apex predators sharing a single land, and a land can only ever carry one true master at the top. They want exactly the same things: the same water, the same herds of slow giants, the same shady ambush ground down along the rivers where prey comes to drink. The dragon has held that top spot for perhaps 1,000,000 years, armed with armor, ambush, venom, and endless patience, with no rival its own size ever to answer to. The human has held it for a single generation on this soil, but the human carries fire and spears and other humans, and a mind that plans well past the setting of the sun. And they are not matched in the way you might expect, because one-on-one in a straight fight, the dragon wins easily, and Marn knows it in his bones. No single spear thrown by one man stops a 7-meter lizard mid-charge. If this were ever a duel, the story simply ends with a man in the reeds and a patient giant beside him. But the dragon is always one animal, utterly alone, and the human is never, ever alone, and that single difference turns out to be everything. A band that hunts with fire and numbers and forethought does not need to defeat the giant in single combat. It only needs to outlast it, one lean season, one lost clutch of eggs, one starved winter at a time. The giant fights the only way it ever has, alone, patient, brilliant, and steadily outnumbered, while the humans fight the only way that keeps them alive, which is together, remembering and teaching. This is the quiet superpower of our kind, the one weapon the dragon can never answer. A human death is not wasted, because the lesson it teaches outlives the person and travels forward into every child who hears the story. They pass the hard-won knowledge of the dragon down through their children, so that each generation begins already knowing what took the last one so many deaths to learn. And so the crown quietly changes hands, not in a moment, not in any battle a person could name, but in a slow surrender that no human eye ever fully witnessed. Somewhere on some unremarkable dusk, the very last great dragon on earth lay down beside a forgotten waterhole and simply did not get up again. There was no witness, no triumph, no final battle, only a country that at long last had room for just one single kind of hunter. And here is where we must walk carefully and speak with real respect, because we are stepping now toward living traditions that are not ours to claim. Across Aboriginal Australia, there are stories tens of thousands of years deep, of giant reptiles at the water. There's the rainbow serpent, and there are beings older than memory that swallow the unwary who come too close to the wrong pool, stories held sacred by the peoples who carry them. We cannot say these are memories of Megalania, and no honest person would try. That door is closed, and it is not ours to force. But some researchers wonder quietly, carefully, always as a question and never once as a claim, whether a few of the very oldest stories might preserve something no other culture on Earth was ever positioned to keep. The real shape of a real monster, carried down in spoken words across 100 lifetimes, from the mouths of people who may actually have stood at the water and seen it. Because these are, quite literally, the longest-running stories in the entire world, and the people who tell them stayed in one place long enough to keep them. Scientists have shown that some coastal traditions here accurately record shorelines that drowned more than 7,000 years ago, which proves such deep memory is at least possible. So the question is not whether these people can remember across vast time, only how far back the thread reaches. Whether or not the memory truly survived, the overlap itself was real, and that is the part no one disputes. For a span of time we can barely hold in our minds, a people and a dragon shared the same water holes, the same dusk, the same electric fear of the reeds going suddenly still. Marn himself will die and be forgotten, and his name is only one we invented tonight to give this vast story a single human face. But his people stayed, and his people are still here, the oldest continuous living culture on the entire planet. Their memory reaches back in an unbroken thread across 50,000 years, all the way to the first footprints pressed into that empty red shore. The dragon, though, did not stay. The largest land lizard that ever lived, armored, very possibly venomous, a king of its world for 1,000,000 years, is gone. And the thin, soft-skinned newcomers who once crept around its waterholes in terror are, in all likelihood, the reason it is only a story now. That is the strange, heavy truth sitting at the very center of this, and it is worth holding for a moment before we let it go. We did not begin as the masters of anything. We came ashore as the smallest, softest strangers in a land of monsters, armed with nothing but fire, memory, and one another. But on this one continent, at the far edge of the whole human world, we met a dragon, and in the end, we were the very last thing it ever had reason to fear.